Good afternoon, colleagues and friends, and good morning, colleagues and friends from America. I'm really happy to open this important event on Ecomuseums and Climate Actions that is inside the program All for Climate Italy 2021, the satellite event of the pre-COP 26. This is the pre-conference of the parties on climate change that is held in Milan before the COP26 in Glasgow. The event is organized by Italian Ecomuseums Network inside the celebration program of 15 years of ecomuseology and the University of Milano Bicocca, the Cateran Ecomuseum from UK, and the Associazione Brasileira de Ecomuseu e Museu Comunitários, and the DROP International Platform for Ecomuseums and Community Museums. It is also part of the satellite events of the World Forum on Democracy promoted by European Council on the issue Can Democracy Save the Environment? This event is also linked to the resolution Museums, Communities and Sustainability that ICOM approved in the General Conference of Kyoto that also underline the role of community museums in achieving the United Nations 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, in particular the climate justice. The event, as Raul already said, is in streaming and it is recorded. Well, why we decided to organize this event? The climate crisis is the defining challenge of our time and we should try to tackle it all together. Most people and institutions are worried about the climate crisis, but stay silent and continue to be inactive. It is necessary to create a culture for action on climate, inviting people and institutions to take part in the debate about climate action and building a community around this topic. With this event, we want to focus our attention on eco-museums and community museums and to discuss how such institutions could bring people together to learn about the solution and join the fight for a better world, providing pathways into civic engagement. Some museums around the world are already promoting educational programs on this topic, and in New York City, there is also a climate action museum. But what we wanted to discuss today is the role of eco-museums and community museums. The conference is organized in 3 sections. In the first session, local authorities and Professor Peter Davis will give a brief message about the topic. The second session will show eco-museums practices for climate action, and the speaker will present eco-museums and the community museums practices and projects in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. In the third session, experts will talk about the community-based museums' role for climate action. In the conclusion, Harry McGill gives us a stimuli for the future, for a better future. At the end of the conference, there will be time for questions that can be asked preferably through the chat of the Zoom platform or via the Facebook page of the Italian Ecomuseums Network in the comments area. So I think that we can start with the first session, but Raul, you say that you prefer to launch some videos before the video from Alberto. Yes, please.
Let's start the video. It's a video from Poland, the Ecomuseum of Poland. Okay, Nuncia, we can go on.
Okay. We can now launch the video from Alberto Garlandini, the president of ICOM International, for his institutional greetings. Unfortunately, Alberto can stay with us this afternoon, but I would like to say a super thank you to Alberto for your precious support to eco-museums and the community museums around the world. So I think that we can launch the video, the institutional greetings videos from Alberto.
Here it is.
Dear friends and colleagues, it is a great pleasure to be here with you today. Today's forum, a satellite event of the pre-COP26 on climate change, will discuss a strategic theme, the Agenda 2030 and climate action, the role of ecomuseums and community museums. Since 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic has jeopardized the lives of millions of people around the world. I wish to take this opportunity to commend once more the work of all museum professionals who have guaranteed their public service and mission under the most exceptional circumstances. The pandemic is still a priority. Nonetheless, the devastating effects of the climate crisis continue to impact our natural and cultural heritage at a global level. The dramatic biodiversity loss and the climate crisis show us how tight relations between man, biosphere, and geosphere are. The cultures of the world, the cultures of the Anthropocene are suffering because landscape, natural sources, and livability are endangered. Indigenous communities are at the forefront of the climate crisis. Not only are their livelihoods under threat, also their cultural heritage cannot survive without their natural habitats. Even native languages are in constant decline as a result of the climate crisis. Fighting the climate crisis and the loss of biodiversity is an imperative of our times. Museums, eco-museums, and all cultural institutions are essential to ensure a sustainable future. They play a key role not only in fostering knowledge, awareness, and behavior changes, but also in sustaining mitigation strategies. Museums and eco-museums are in a unique position to support environmental policies, disseminate scientific information, and sustainable practices in the local communities. In September 2019, the International Council of Museums General Assembly in Kyoto, Japan, passed the resolution on sustainability and the implementation of Agenda 2030, transforming our world. The 2030 Agenda has become the fundamental reference for ICOM's work over the next decade and beyond. On Earth Day 2021, ICOM joined the global coalition United for Biodiversity. Let me now heartily thank the ICOM's Working Group on Sustainability that supports our organization in implementing the Kyoto's resolution. I am glad to see that today some members of our working group like Michaela Rota and Harry McGee will give their contribution to the debate. ICOM sustains museums all over the world so that they integrate the attainment of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and the fight against the climate crisis in their mission and vision. ICOM supports all the initiatives promoting awareness about the climate crisis, as well as sustainable behavior, responsibility, and civic participation in all communities. The first G20 Culture Ministers meeting was held in Rome at the end of July 2021. It focused on the importance of culture and cultural institutions for the sustainable world. ICOM was one of the two non-governmental organizations invited to the summit. We were an active partner throughout the preparatory work. I am proud to say that the museum's voice was heard throughout the meeting. All the events were held in museums. An Italian museum director, an ICOM member, made one of the opening speeches at the Colosseum, and I presented a keynote speech on addressing the climate crisis through culture. In the final declaration, the G20 countries recognized ICOM as an important actor of international cultural action and highlighted the indispensable role of museums in heritage protection, sustainable development, and education. Dear friends and colleagues, global challenges call for global responses. International cooperation is needed now more than ever. It's time that together we take bold steps to ensure that culture and museums fulfill their role in addressing climate change and contributing to climate action. ICOM fully supports your proposal to create an Ecomuseums and Community Museums coalition after the COP26. ICOM calls museums and eco-museums to face the challenge and lead the change. Now is the time for new responsibilities, the time for unity and cooperation. As ICOM founding fathers stated in 1946, only together will we be able to move forward. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Alberto, for your contribution and above all for inviting us to remember that is time museums fulfill their role in addressing climate change and contributing to climate action. Now I can give the floor to Professor Peter Davis, Emeritus Professor in Museology at the University of Newcastle upon Tyne. He is my great friend and he introduced me to the world of ecomuseums. Please, Peter.
Thank you, Nuncia, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here with you all in this virtual Milan. The aim of this meeting, as we've heard, is about sharing information about how ecomuseums and community museums can contribute to the debate about the climate crisis. We'll consider what actions we can take with our communities to protect our cultural, natural, and intangible cultural heritage, those features that make our places special and give us a sense of belonging. We'll hear from an international array of speakers about their work, their hopes, and plans for the future. How are their ecomuseums and community museums acting as catalysts for change, renewable, and sustainable development? Can they effectively contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals and climate action? These are big questions for small museums. I've been very fortunate to visit Milan on several occasions, and one of my abiding memories is seeing Leonardo's Last Supper in the convent of Santa Maria. And thinking about Milan and Leonardo prompted me to reread Walter Isaacson's biography of the artist, where I was reminded of Leonardo's fascination with and reflections on apocalypse. It was a vision that he frequently returned to, and in the Codex Arundel, we can read this description written by him. What he wrote was, "The rivers will be deprived of their waters. The earth will no longer put forth her greenery. The fields will no more be decked with waving corn. All the animals, finding no fresh grass for pasture, will die. In this way, the fertile and fruitful earth will be forced to end with the element of fire, and then its surface will be left burnt to a cinder, and this will be the end of all earthly nature." This wasn't a prophecy, it was simply Leonardo's fertile imagination, his vision of what an apocalypse could be. But he isn't very far from describing many of the events that we are now witnessing. This year, huge forest fires have become commonplace, with disastrous effects on nature and communities. Just one example, in California, the largest and most ancient trees in the world, some more than 2,500 years old, are under threat as the Sequoia National Park faces a huge fire risk. Many ancient and giant trees have already been lost. The Sequoia National Park is currently closed. Other tragic environmental events, severe flooding, landslides, desertification, acidification, have impacted on communities, many of them in remote rural areas. The climate crisis, the loss of cultural assets, and the biodiversity crisis are intertwined. Returning to Leonardo, a key feature of his life was his love of the little town of Vinci. It was his place, and he returned there frequently. You can only imagine how he would feel about the potential impact of climate crisis on the town, on its people, its landscape, its economy, and its traditions. Place and belonging, the intersection of communities, culture, traditions, history, landscape, and nature, are central to eco-museums and community museums, and have been since the inception of the eco-museum idea some 50 years ago. As individuals and communities, we treasure these places. We're proud of them. So how, against the odds, can we possibly build for the future? We're not searching for a utopia, but simply somewhere decent for us all to live, a place where there is an appreciation of the old ways in modern times. Can rural landscapes and communities around the world, with their age-old rhythms of work, weather, and wild things survive? And can we leave a legacy for the future? So returning to the question I posed earlier, what practical roles can museums, eco-museums, and community museums play, and what are their strengths? As Alberto has already mentioned, the museum world is, of course, greatly engaged in these debates. And we've heard about the G20 Culture Ministers meeting on climate change and culture, where ICOM took a major role. Alberto drew very close attention in that meeting to the close connection between climate change and the damage to natural and cultural heritage. And he stressed how museums, being trusted institutions, can play a major role in raising awareness and engaging local communities to support climate action. Alberto also mentioned Kyoto 2019 and resolution number 1 on sustainability and the implementation of Agenda 2030, which really was a clarion call, I think, for museums worldwide to react to the climate crisis. Perhaps for this meeting, even more significant was resolution number 5, museums, communities, and sustainability. This resolution demanded ICOM give greater recognition of and support for community museums and eco-museums. This resolution stresses the contribution that they make to safeguarding, understanding, and promoting access to natural, cultural, and intangible heritages. What is it about eco-museums and community museums that make them especially pertinent to these debates? Let me take you back to two slogans that emerged as environmental concerns grew in the 1960s, namely think global, act local, and small is beautiful. Think global, act local, although appropriated by the environmental movement, was actually coined as early as 1915 by the Scottish conservationist Patrick Geddes, but it's just as pertinent today, and especially so for community museums and eco-museums. As community-based organizations, we are aware of the big picture, but our focus is on our place, our locality, our heritage. Individual eco-museums can react to local needs and take small steps to a better future. If all eco-museums and community museums act together, we can make a real difference. Small is Beautiful was also adopted by the environmental movement. It was the title of Schumacher's book, Small is Beautiful, a study of economics as if people mattered. He suggested we use appropriate technologies, actions and policies as an alternative to the mainstream idea of bigger is better. Eco-museums and community museums in the main are small organizations rooted in their communities, so fit perfectly into this small ethos. We can be alert, nimble, and take opportunities. Udavarine suggested that eco-museums should be audacious, imaginative, and find new ways of working. And we can do this because we know our place and we're not subject to specific rules or conventions, and our communities can make the big decisions. To conclude then, why are eco-museums and community museums important to debates about climate change, biodiversity loss, changes to landscapes and lifescapes, and sustainability? The following are the reasons why I feel they're important. They are locally focused. They are welcoming to all. They're connected and help each other and learn from one another. They inspire wonder and increase awareness of the heritage of specific localities. They grow knowledge within and beyond the community about heritage, and they encourage participation with and by the community. They are strong environmental catalysts, encouraging local people to act for the natural and cultural environment. They can equip people to monitor environmental change and make conservation efforts to protect the heritage we care about. They support other heritage organization conservation efforts to sustain culture and nature, and they can review their own carbon footprint and environmental impacts. I'm sure many of these features will become apparent as we move now to hear the experiences of our speakers in the next session, Eco-Museum Practices for Climate Action. So thank you very much for listening, and I pass you over now to Nuncia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, for your interesting contribution and above all for helping us in understanding better what ecomuseums are and above all what they could be. And I also hope that your speech can become a chapter for the book that we are going to publish. Thank you, Peter.
Okay, my pleasure.
Okay, we can now start the second session about ecomuseums practices for climate action, coordinated by Edo Brichetti, who is a member of the Italian Ecomuseums Network. So I'll hand the floor over to Edo.
Okay, welcome to everyone from all over the world. This is a fantastic day where important people will give their contribution about the best practice. In Milano, there took place and there is taking place an important international meeting with the young people from all over the world. The President Mattarella and the Prime Minister Draghi just joined the young people, and they assured that it's time to act soon. So I am acting soon, and I'll pass the stage to Claire Cooper, Claire works across the fields of regeneration, culture, tourism, and public health. In addition, he is co-founder and the co-director of the Catalan Ecomuseum. So it's an honor to give her the stage. I only ask you, please, because you see I've got the clock just in front of me, you've got 8 minutes, because this session is very, very, very crowded, and we want to give room to all the others. Claire, it's up to you.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's a great honor for me to be part of this event and to have the opportunity to share with you how the Catalan Ecomuseum in Scotland is mobilizing heritage for climate action. Our Ecomuseum, which is only the second in Scotland, is set across 1,000 square kilometres of rural Eastern Perthshire and Western Angus in Tayside, in the middle of Scotland, if you look at that map in the right-hand corner. Launched in November 2019, just before the pandemic, we aim to tell the story of this part of Tayside across 6,000 years of human history and 400 million years of geological history. And like many parts of Scotland, we have a treasure trove of natural and cultural heritage to draw on. Huge prehistoric megaliths and Pictish symbol stones, unknown stories from the great legends of King Arthur and the Pan-Gaelic hero Finn McCool. Contemporary histories of the Scottish traveller community, important events linked to the great Jacobite rebellions, fables of the Caterans themselves, the Highland clan warriors who came to be associated with cattle raiding in the 17th and 18th centuries. You can discover the history of Scotland's berry capital, Blairgowrie, and visit the site of its 12 Victorian textile mills. You can walk a part of the Highland boundary fault in Ailith and enjoy its well-preserved old town centre. A hike along the Cateran Trail, one of Scotland's great long-distance footpaths, offers you spectacular views through huge landscapes, sculpted by glaciation and traversed by old drove roads and ancient rights of way. Aimed at attracting both local people and visitors, we've put together 24 pre-designed itineraries connecting folk to 134 points of natural and cultural heritage interest. And we've only just started to scratch the surface of what we could share. Funding permitting, we also have a regular programme of events and activities that aim to interpret this heritage in unusual and surprising ways. Now, at the same time that we launched our Ecomuseum in 2019, we started to think about the second stage of our development. And despite the pandemic scuppering our plans in 2020, in January this year, we launched a 3-year programme dedicated to climate action under the rather unusual title of the Museum of Rapid Transition. The inspiration for this framing came from Andrew Sims of the Rapid Transition Alliance and a very powerful provocation he wrote in 2019, which emphasised the huge currently underutilised potential that our heritage has to help people build more regenerative and resilient lifestyles and mobilise climate action. Not only are they a knowledge and learning resource which can help contextualise what is happening, they are a participative force which can bring people together, challenge the status quo, and create spaces, both physically and in our minds, to imagine that anything is possible. And as our Museum of Rapid Transition programme ideas have come together, it has become evident to us that the place-based, community-led ethos of eco-museums creates uniquely powerful opportunities to help people respond to the cascading crises we face, to tell a new story of place. Our new Museum of Rapid Transition story begins this year with a focus on landscapes, with projects and activities that reveal how changes in geology and climate have shaped our landscapes, determined the flora and fauna, influenced human settlement, land use, and social and political organisation, and demonstrate both how our past actions have degraded these landscapes and how, by reconnecting to ancient knowledge, we can regenerate and innovate our relationship with it. We're using the environmental discipline of paleoecology and the public engagement mechanism of citizen science to tell a new story about one of the Ecomuseum's principal rivers, showing how investigation of past environments can be used to restore ecosystems now and in the future. We've designed hands-on learning experiences in heritage-based knowledge and skills that reintroduce people to ideas that might help them take regenerative action in their everyday lives today. We've created a new story bank of films which illuminate how past communities from all cultures across the world understood their interdependence with trees and passed on that knowledge through stories, myths, and legends. And these are being used by local climate and sustainability groups as conversation starters in the run-up to COP26, and to promote another itinerary that we're developing that will guide people to trees chosen by local people for their personal importance. Also in time for COP26, we're creating a 50-metre long, 2-metre high timeline of 20,000 years of climate change in this part of Scotland, which will be exhibited outside in one of the Ecomuseum's main towns. Its message is simple: will we use the lessons from the past to shape a more regenerative future? Connected to this exhibition is an artist in residence who is working with townsfolk on the creation of another piece of public art that makes manifest that regenerative future. In fact, working with the best of our local contemporary artists is an important part of our ethos. Their imagination, that uniquely human capacity to envision that which is not, to heighten our senses, interpret our deepest feelings, and create meaning in so many ways is something all of us have experienced. And the role of contemporary artists in reinterpreting our heritage needs, in my view, to be much more highly valued and utilised. We need both reason and re-enchantment to help us navigate the future. And an example, this is stuff. Oh, there we go. An example of our equal focus on re-enchantment is the creation of a giant 1,500 square metre hand on one of the hillsides in the northern part of the Ecomuseum. Made out of jute and geotextile and fixed to the hillside with steel pins, it is inspired by the Glen's strong links with the legendary Pan-Gallic giant hero Finn McCool. And on the first day of COP26, we plan to wake him up with the Carnix, the ancient Pictish war horn, which will be sounded 3 times, as one of the old stories about Finn tells us that he is asleep under the mountains with his warriors, ready to be woken by the signal in order to come to our aid. And finally, having significantly grown the number of walking and cycling experiences that can be enjoyed by visitors, we've begun to promote the Ecomuseum as one of Scotland's best car-free holiday destinations, all part of the regenerative tourism frame that we're now using to communicate all our visitor-facing work. Next year, funding permitting, we will foreground the role of imagination in our past. Widely regarded as one of humanity's most powerful attributes, we will illustrate how imagination was used to build community resilience and rehearse radical change. And in 2023, we will draw our species' remarkable capacity for design in response to continuous change and the creation of new knowledge, exemplifying how, by reconnecting to the ingenuity and innovation of our design history, we might draw inspiration from it to catalyse the design innovations we need now to make that leap to a more livable world. So aligning our work against the 2030 SDGs, we identify especially with these on this slide, but we're also very guided by our own Scottish Government National Performance Network, which of course has many crossovers with the SDGs. So that is a very tiny snapshot of how our Ecomuseum, the Cateran Ecomuseum, is mobilising heritage for climate action. And I think now that I'm going to pass on to Raul. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful, Claire. And your landscape is like the Scottish song Amazing Grace. Fantastic. And now I'm passing the stage to, first of all, my friend, Raul Del Santo, who is a very important person. He is an ecologist, the coordinator of the Ecomuseum of Parabiago, Mulini Natural Park, and he is also the manager of a platform for ecomuseums and community museums, which is the web platform Drops. So Raul, it's up to you. Well, Claire, 8 minutes. Fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you very much and good evening. I would like to talk about Italian ecomuseums and the climate action, and in particular what happened in the Parabiago Ecomuseum that I manage. Here it is my ecomuseum, the city, the river, and so on. We are near Milan in the north part of Italy. Even here in Parabiago, there are climate sentinels like this rare butterfly, and natural disaster more and more frequent and intense. Sentinels and disasters show that the climate is changing. Young people also here in Parabiago ask for action. This is what happened. First, we defined a long-term strategy, then goals to achieve, and finally, evaluation of impact. The strategy of Italian Ecomuseum is linking global and local sustainability. In 2019, Italian Ecomuseums modified their strategic manifesto and underlined that Italian ecomuseums are committed to caring for heritage. The manifesto also stresses the role of ecomuseum for development of communities, the achievement of the 2030 United Nations goals, in particular the climate action. These are the goals we want to achieve. They are interdependent goals and represent the largest and most global effort to effect change capable of setting humanity and the biosphere on a path towards a sustainable future. We considered impacts inside and outside the Ecomuseum. In this building, there are the Ecomuseum's office and other offices of the municipality of Parabiago. We worked on energy efficiency, thermal, for example, thermal insulation of building, lighting, the reduction of carbon emission through energy production, and waste minimization. But the core business of the Parabiago Ecomuseum and many other ecomuseums in Italy is outside the office, working not only for, but also with the community. To produce outside impacts, we are going on the stairs of participation, up and up to the people empowerment. That is, make people able to carry out projects for the common interest and with an holistic vision. For example, we empowered many local stakeholders to activate the circular economy of the Parabiago bread. This is the diagram of the circular economy of the bread of Parabiago. I just talk about the points related to climate action. 170 hectares of agricultural fields are cultivated with the conservative agriculture. This agriculture impacts in a minimum manner on the ground. It reduces CO2 emissions, preserves biodiversity and the humus. The fields are fertilized by the compost produced in a local farm from vegetable waste coming from the public and the private gardens of Parabiago.
What's happening?
It is stopped. I don't know why.
No.
Okay. The bread was the first of many products made in Parabiago. The Ecomuseum empowered people to leave agribusiness and start agroecology. Agroecology produces both good food and agroecosystem service. For example, landscape, oxygen production, climate regulation, and so on. We carry out education activities and promote forestation inside the Forestami project aimed at planting 3 million of trees by 2030 in the metropolitan city. The butterfly reminds me also an important action that the Ecomuseum can do. They can help people understand who they are and be aware of their cultural heritage. According to Dante, men are like worms due to their imperfection, but they are destined to become a butterfly as long as they are not diverted by their pride and sense of omnipotence. Ecomuseum can tell people that the flapping of a butterfly's wings can cause an hurricane on the other side of the world. This is the butterfly effect. Everything is related, everything is connected, and small action can help to generate big changes. Thank you very much.
Well done, well done. You just put the accent on outside action of ecomuseums, and this is very important because we always say museum is important, but a museum which goes outside is more active, is more powerful. Now I pass the stage to, I don't know the pronunciation, Gelson Rosentino de Almeida, who is the director of Ecomuseo, La Grande Ecomuseum. He is a doctor in history and associate professor at the University of Estado do Rio de Janeiro. I beg your pardon for my pronunciation, Gelson. It's up to you.
Oh, thank you, Edu. Sure. You see?
See, yes, we see.
Oh, thank you for your presentation, Edu. I'm honored to represent the Brazilian Association of Ecomuseums and Community Museums, ABRENC, whose mission is to promote the creation, development, support, and dissemination of ecomuseums, community museums, and similar processes. The ABRENC considers the Sustainable Development Goals to be fundamental in their projects and actions. We must understand that these institutions occupy a privileged place of these actions due to their proximity to the community. Ilha Grande is the fate of Ilha Grande in the state of Rio de Janeiro has a total area 193 square kilometers with exuberant fauna and flora native of the Atlantic forest, a rich marine life and high geomorphological diversity, farms, quarantine, hospital, and prisons, was island prison in the past, and traditional community. All these factors contributed for UNESCO to recognize Ilha Grande as part for the first Brazilian site to be considered by the same time cultural and biodiversity heritage, a World Heritage of Humanity. Ecomuseu Ilha Grande is both an ecomuseu and a university museum, which integrates the Universidade do Estado do Rio de Janeiro. The Ecomuseu Ilha Grande have 4 units: Museu do Cárcere, Prison Museum, Museu do Meio Ambiente, Environment Museum, Centro Multimedia, Multimedia Center, and Botanical Park, Parque Botânico. The mission of the Ecomuseu Ilha Grande is to incorporate the community as the subject of the process of conservation and sustainable development of the territory of Ilha Grande through the preservation, research, and appreciation of history, as well to promoting its memory, culture, and identity. The Ecomuseu Ilha Grande is a museum that, with the basis firmly established in the past, invites everyone to see the present in a sustainable way and participate in the construction of the better and fairer future in environmental and social terms. A powerful instrument used by the Ecomuseums Grande for the action in the project is sustainable development goals. All goals are reference for us. The Ecomuseums Recycle project of the concerning a select and disorganized ground of Ilha Grande. The problem is especially accentuated in the summer with the escalation of tourism. Several structural problems are aggravated, especially the accumulation of solid waste transported and discarded on the continent. The Ecomuseums Recycle project has offered the community of Ilha Grande Council's handcraft production techniques which contribute to the elimination of carbon in the environment. This project eliminates pet waste in Vila dos Rios and has served as a model of the other communities. With the summer purpose, the Botanical Park is building a wall of PET bottles. Around 8,000 PET bottles will be reused. This project is expected to help reduce the solid waste, train residents for the development for this type of construction with less environment impact, represent a new opportunity to generate employment and income, and at the same time promote environmental education and conservation of the environment. In this way, we meet Goal 15. Based on Goal 11, we develop activities for the reuse of PET, Tetra Pak, and paper, conducting workshops, encouraging discussion, and environment awareness, importance of preserving the ecosystem and with it the well-being of future population. We have established important partnerships with groups, companies, and cities that work with the reuse of recyclables, enhancing the removal of that waste. With more Goal 4, we have promoted courses, lectures, conversation circles, and various projects for the communities with quality science information in accessible language, and also encourage young people to engage in science. Based on Goal 14, we carried out the project Marine Biodiversity of Ilha Grande Bay, Marine Biology, a way to tell the stories of the sea, and monitor marine monitoring of the Ilha Grande Bay. For Goal 5, we have the Girls and Women Science project. From the Ecomuseums Ilha Grande and community-based tourism project, we meet Goal 1, encouraging local initiatives to develop products and use raw materials to generate income and local development, valuing history and culture of local communities. The Ilha Grande and Community Health Project is linked to Goal 3. Its purpose is to promote preventive health care actions in isolated communities and Ilha Grande, contribute to improving the quality of life of communities with an emphasis on women. The project Museum of Prison, Culture and Freedom, linked to Goal 16, aims to register, preserve, and enhance the prison memory of the community of Vila dos Rios. We promote reflections of human rights with the exposition and the star of rights. The Ecomuseums Ilha Grande proposed to be an interlocutor between different social actors, such as the university, city hall, state organization, tourism, business sector, neighborhood association, and non-governmental organization. It takes the willingness to listen, meet, and learn through experience, as well as share. Brazil, Bolsonaro's government has suffered the strength of the effects caused due to the country's bad management. It's wide. It goes from the return of hunger, inflation, unemployment, and poverty to the preventable deaths of 600,000 Brazilians due to COVID and the president's lack of urgency in assuring the population access to vaccine. When it comes to environmental protection, sadly, the reality is just as tragic. Increase in deforestation, increase in the deforestation and fires that have grown significantly in the last 3 years, mainly in the Amazon. We need to address environment protection as an inseparable part of the national development process. More than ever, Effective global climate commitments and action are needed to reverse the damage caused by climate change. Human degradation goes hand in hand with environmental degradation. The forms of production and exploitation of man and natural resources by the capitalism need to be revised. However, in the meantime, we at Ecomuseu Ilha Grande, as well as other ecomuseums and community museums, can and must do our work together with the communities. Through local action and articulation with the other forces can contribute to a transformative action even bigger. It may not be enough, but we can't give up on doing the best we can. We can't give up on the planet. We can't give up on life. Together, we are stronger. Thanks.
That's it. That's it. A great thanking to you. A great thanking to you.
Oh, my pleasure.
And I think that Brazil is one of the most wounded countries in the world. I'm thinking of the deforestation of tropical forests. So I was very impressed by the woman and by your project Recycle. When you wrote, the woman said, it gives me a sense of living. I think this is very important. Well, now,
Gracias, Emilio.
Pardon, I'm just throwing the page to my Karen Brown. You remember me when we met in Milano? Karen Brown. Karen Brown is a senior lecturer in art, history, museum, and gallery studies at University of St. Andrews. I love St. Andrews very, very much. And but she does a lot of things. For example, she operates with the ULAC museums in Chile, Costa Rica, France, Peru, Portugal, Scotland, Spain. My dear friend, but you traveled much, you travel a lot. Now I'm leaving the stage to you, Karen.
Thank you so much, Ido. And yes, of course I remember meeting you very well, and it's an absolute honor to be back here and surrounded by so many inspirational people. I'm already really excited about this conference. Thank you. I will time myself to hope to stay on time. So, and hopefully the PowerPoint will behave. Here we go. So just to begin with a short video. So I've been invited here to share some experiences from this project, this very large project, EU-LAC Museums, but in particular to speak to experiences from Peru and Costa Rica. So I have used up half of my time with the video, which I hope give you a sense of the collaborations that were made possible between Europe and Latin America. And now I'll say a little bit more in depth about case studies from Peru and Costa Rica. So in Peru, the team, which was based in the Pontifical Catholic University, worked with a number of museums, and one of them was an ecomuseum. So Museo de Sito Tucumé is an ecomuseum located in the north of Peru in a desertous region, identified mainly because a lot of projects working in Peru would center around Lima and the major sites. And in this case, our principal investigator, Luis Repetto, wanted to work with the north. So this is a picture from Tucumé Ecomuseum, an activity that a lot of ecomuseums would engage in, mapping the local territory and significant sites and animals and foodstuffs that were important to the local community. So a big focus of this work was intergenerational transmission of knowledge, getting to know your territory, and working with schools. The museum highlighted in the video was Chan Chan, which is a much bigger museum and better known through tourist circles. But in this case, it was a unique opportunity to work with local schools around ideas of local biodiversity and also traditional crafts. In this case, adobe brick making being enjoyed by the local school. Also working with women's groups and local groups for traditional crafts such as chicha making, which you can see here. And by the end of this series of workshops, the team in Peru promoted also a workshop on micro-enterprise, which encouraged the participants to think about ways to set up a small enterprise and to make some income from the goods that they were creating based on the traditional knowledge. So in relation to sustainable development, climate change, just after the project had begun, not long afterwards, there was the large El Nino of 2017, and this became a focus of our project following a hiatus to the work of Peru that became quite significant. And so the project adapted a little bit and ran disaster workshops in Peru, as you can see here from this photograph, linking in with the Sustainable Development Goals, with the different actors involved in disaster preparedness and also disaster response. In the video, I highlighted the important collaboration that happened between Spain and Peru, in this case, thinking about traditional systems of governance around water, how to manage water. This is the Corongo water judges in northern Peru and the Valencian water judges dressed in black. The resolution referred to already, I'm sure some of you have seen it before, but I did just want to emphasize in this forum that the idea for including reference to the UN 2030 goals and climate justice was heavily promoted by our dear friend, Luis Repetto from Peru, who sadly has now passed away. So I just want to say quickly that I'm working on another project now with Peru following EU-LAC Museums ending, this case with a geographer in our university, Nina Laurie, which looks specifically at El Nino in the north of Peru, working with a local school. I'm running out of time. So just to say quickly, we've seen the Costa Rica case study in the video. In this case, we worked mainly on a youth exchange in conjunction with an eco-museum and 2 community museums. As you can see, there are a whole range of activities for the young people to get to know each other in this really significant and life-changing cultural exchange. But again, climate change had an impact. And you can see here the impact of the floods, again in 2017 from Hurricane Nate, that were responded to in this case by one of our project advisors, Samuel Franco. And here you can see, again, there was more flooding in 2020, and this has become a priority then for Costa Rica. And you can see some images here of the cleanup And so in response to this, we are collaborating once again with the National Museum of Costa Rica, the network of community museums of Costa Rica, which in turn is connected to the network of community museums of America, to assist in this process with a bottom-up initiative very much led by the communities themselves, where they are building a community garden in a paddock of the school. And so we have researchers from sustainable development, memory studies, heritage studies, and museum studies, all working together on this initiative. And I just thought it would be worth mentioning that EU-LAC museums didn't just stop with a full stop, that we are carrying on. And I'm over time, so I think I'd better stop. Thank you so much for listening.
Fantastic, fantastic, Karen. I saw a photograph of Valencia, Tribunal de Agua, you remember, with a water museums network. Well, I think that ecomuseums all over the world could be different, but something unites them, which is the identity of people who are called even to fight against the climate challenge. I think this is very important. Everything is connected. Now I pass the word to, hey, my dear, no, I could hear, Oscar Navajas Corral, who is a doctor in history and museology from the University of Alcalá, Madrid. And now he's a deputy director and lecturer in the Department of History and Philosophy at the University of Alcalá. Well, his curriculum is very long. I could say that we need more days to read it. But anyway, where are you, Oscar? I give you the word. Where are you?
I'm here.
Oh, I see you.
Could you listen?
Yes.
Yes. Hi, good afternoon. Buongiorno.
Buongiorno. Ciao.
Ciao. Okay. Could I share my screen, please? Or I can compartir. Yes. Where is this one? Okay. Okay, could you see it?
Yes, I see.
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you very much for the invitation to this conference. I am really happy. I'm tired because I finished my classes today, so I tried to concentrate in the presentation. Sorry for the mistake.
Take it easy.
Okay. Sorry for the mistake. Okay. The first one is to present how is the panorama of ecomuseums, the ecomuseums in Spain. Most of you know this presentation because we share the Eco-Heritage project. But for the other people, the panorama of Spanish ecomuseums is around 120 ecomuseums in Spain, but only 92 is open. Most of them are in the south of Spain, Andalusia, and in the middle, so in Castilla León and Catalonia is the best practice. Our panorama is not like Italian panorama because we don't have law about the ecomuseums. There are no official reconocimiento, I don't know. The main data of our ecomuseums is the nature of this institution is most of them are public institutions, so their founding give from the public administrations or the the tax, and the less of our ecomuseum belong to the private institution. The main purpose of this institution, the objective or the mission is a social participation, new models for the local economy. They are close to the cultural industries or creative industries, very related with the theories of creative class of Richard Florida. And most of them is related to the territory, heritage, and of course, biodiversity and sustainability. And the main heritage to conserve or to yes, to conserve is the landscape, countryside, traditional craft, biodiversity, etc. But it's very important in our ecomuseum, there are a mentality to achieve a new resource in funding, resource in research, new models of research, and to give funding for maintain the institution. So related with the goals of sustainability, SDG, our ecomuseums normally work with the 4, 5, and 50 SDG sustainability is quality education, gender equality, and life on land. The middle of the half of the ecomuseums implement the UNESCO and ONU and UN, sorry, SDG in their activities, but no exclusive activities in SDG if related with other activities of the ecomuseum. This is the 16 SDG, UNESCO SDG about the sustainability, and quality education is the most important. The second is ecosystem life in the land, life and territory. And this one I don't remember. This is the activities created with about the related with the SDG and activity of ecomuseums. It's very particular. There are no exclusive activity related with the ecological SDG from UNESCO and National Union. The reason in most of our ecomuseum is that they think I don't know how to explain. I think I prefer to read because it's better in the next. Okay, here. This is a quote right with by Barin. And ecomuseums, like other museological typologies that promote community participation, propose a change in the way of understanding the reason of being of museums in society. It was proposed to transform the museological process into a means of direct participation of the individual and the community, as well as to offer a tool for the integral development of heritage and territory. Authors such as Boylan, Hamrin and Hollander, Peter Davis, Corsan, Pierre Meyrand, etc., carry out research to know the characteristic of ecomuseums from other types of museums: community participation, museums without walls, institution in constant evolution, a tool for social, cultural, and economic development, etc., are some of its main characteristics. However, its social and democratic sense is what makes ecomuseums directly related to the idea of sustainability. This is the reason that the idea of sustainability is, I think, different in our ecomuseums panorama. The concept of Ecomuseum, as created by Eutebarin, is constructed by means of the Greek word oikos, so house, home, or territory, or both, which makes the ecomuseums a tool for sustainable local management strategies. For ecomuseums, sustainability is a relationship for actors, a geosystem, considered as a set of biotic, abiotic, and anthropic entities. Spanish ecomuseums today face new challenges, I think, like other ecomuseums in other parts of the world. So climate change, degradation of natural spaces, social justice, demographically depressed in rural environments, etc. Many of them, our ecomuseums, are directly related to the 70 Sustainable Development Goals, so SDG. However, ecomuseum, at least the Spanish ones, are small local museums with few material and economic resources, whose arm for sustainability is not the parameters of establishment by state or supra-state entities, such as national unions or UNESCO, as has been reflected in this way, the several interviews carried out at the different Spanish ecomuseums, but for understanding these two elements for vital importance to them, so to our ecomuseums. One of them is the responsibility. For us, the sustainability starts in the citizen responsibility in management, the heritage, and the territory, so the ecomuseums. And the second one is understand the heritage, natural and cultural heritage, as a commons. In Spain, we speak about pro común, but I think in English is the commons. It's far from the idea of a product, the market system, the public and the private heritage. So it's related with the responsibility of the community, no only an establishment. And this is, I think, this is all. Thank you very much. Grazie. I don't know if it's too fast. Sorry.
No, thank you to you, Oscar. I was impressed by the great concentration of ecomuseums in the south of Spain. Because
yes.
There are two areas, the central one and the southern, Granada, Sevilla, I think, you know, wonderful, wonderful. And this time the south overleads the north. Okay, fantastic. Now it is the stage of, Natalia, please pronounce the name of your ecomuseum, because I don't know the Polish and I don't know where to start. Natalia Nimic Ecomuseum GG in Italic, I don't know, Poland and Slovakia. But from 2016, she worked on a process of establishing a transnational cooperation, I think Poland, Slovakia as well, based on local heritage and tourism, which led to create a Polish-Slovakian ecomuseum. Natalia, pronounce it because I can't.
Hi, yes, it's difficult. Polish language is not easy. The Polish name of Ecomuseum Dziedziny Dunajca, which means lands of the Dunajec River Ecomuseum site. I would like to invite you to Polish-Slovakian cooperation based on national heritage, which is very young. Our Ecomuseum was established a few years ago. I will show you a few pictures and a map, which will help to show where we are.
In a fantastic place, I saw.
It is. This is the view from my window, which I have every day.
My dear.
We are on the south part of Poland. close to the Tatra Mountain National Park, Pieniny National Park, Gorce National Park, Babia Góra National Park, and we are connected by the Dunaj River, which in the past was on the border between the Poland and the Austro-Hungarian kingdom. And because we are very close to Slovakian border, we decided to use the possibility of building cooperation with our Slovakian neighbors. So our small eco-museum, because it's really, really small, it's connected with the transnational cooperation of the south part of Poland, plus a few Slovakian places. There are 3 regions connected with the mountains, Pieniny, Spisz-Podhale, and to Ecomuseum belongs 35 places. Most of the places are based on the tourism. So in short, in 2017, I started to cooperate with our partner foundation Mila from Krakow with Basia Kazior, and we started to map the places which we have in my region, which are connected with the local heritage. And because the region is very much becoming popular and it's becoming tourist destination, we wanted to prepare the offer to show the tourists our heritage, our not just the landscape, but also the culture richness, which is very big in the region. So it took us 2 years to meet with people, talk to them, and to find out that there is willingness to build such a cooperation. After 2 years, those people from those places decided that they are ready to build such a cooperation. So in March 2019, our Ecomuseum was established. In 2020 was the most busy year for us because we were running 4 projects which help us to establish deeper cooperation between us and also to prepare the educational offer for the kids, youth, and the tourism who are visiting us. Who creates Ecomuseum Dziedziny Dunajca? Mostly there are small tourist industry. So the people who are offering accommodation, and mostly this is the agro-tourist places, which they produce their own food. Also small restaurants and catering places, which they produce their own food based on what we have in our region. And also local services helping to show the region and the area from the perspective of sport, like the bicycle places, kayak places, boat places, which you can rent and see the place in the more eco way. And also we have a small group of NGOs and culture community departments who are responsible for organizing workshops, events, concerts, showing the people our local heritage, our rich culture, and also the dialects, because in our Ecomuseum we have 3 dialects, which shows that in the past we were in some way divided because of the borders. I was thinking about how to show the sustainability in Ecomuseum, and I divided in 4 parts: ecological and local food, educational workshops, eco-traveling and sightseeing, and balanced and integral cooperation. So as I mentioned, most of the places are the small businesses focused on tourism. So they are interested in showing people who are visiting the region, not just the place, but also to promote the ecological food, the ecological way of traveling. So this is the way. This is what we have. We have in our Ecomuseum vineyard. We have places where we produce the honeys. Trout, it's the popular fish here, and also we have the shepherds. It's like the profession which is almost disappearing, and for half year those people are taking care of the sheep on the highlands, and they are producing milk and cheese from sheep. And also in our Ecomuseum, we have an unusual member, Akiko, who is a Japanese lady and who have moved here around 30 years ago. And she's using in her kitchen the local herbs, which she's finding in the forest where she's living. So she's combining the local herbs, local plants with Japanese meals. And she's also, I would say, ambassador who is promoting ecology in her own village. She's showing how to make gardens and use the fruits and vegetables in the local meals. And those people who are who are hosting the tourists, they are also selling the local products to them. It's becoming more and more popular that from the place which you are visiting, you would like to bring a kind of souvenir. And most people are focused on bringing healthy food made by locals, and they see the landscape, and they have this trust that this is the food made in a safety way. We are also thinking about educational, because it's really important for us to teach the kids, our own kids from our places, and also the kids who are visiting us about our heritage. So we are organizing, mostly the NGOs who are in Ecomuseum, the handcraft workshops. So the kids can make their own toys from hay, they make their own carpets. We have also the cooking workshops when the ladies from the Women Association are showing the meals which were made by our grannies like 100 years ago, use of the local and very simple products. And they are also sharing the history and the stories, how the people were living here, how the life changed. Also, they are showing the small mini museum of the household furnitures or the books, which you cannot see anymore in the houses right now. We also have a lady who is making her own honeys, and she's offering the workshops to show how bees are important, how the honey is prepared. So like the whole story from the bee to the jar of honey, to make possible people who are visiting us to know more about the history and the culture which we have every day. We organized for free quest. So it's like the written story. When you are starting from one place and following the guides in the text, you are discovering the stories and you are discovering another places. And those quests are for the bikes. So the people who are cycling, they can take a longer ride and get to know the area. And also you can walk in one village or two villages. And it takes like 1 or 2 hours to discover where you are and discover the stories. Because we have such a beautiful landscape where we live, and we would like to promote the healthy lifestyle So we encourage people who are coming here and visiting us to travel, but travel by using bikes, boats, kayaks, and horses. We also have the offers for disabled people or seniors, so they can travel around the lake with the cycling path or special electrical rickshaw. And we also focus on cooperation with the partners, and one of our partners is National Park. And for the park, we were an important partner because they saw the value in the educational part of our Ecomuseum, and they also are facing the struggle with too many tourists. And they see in Ecomuseum possibility that the people who are coming here and visiting the area, they will be interested in discovering another places and taking care of more the nature. And we are also promoting the vanishing professions and local products, because those people are probably the last generation, like the shepherds, who give their time and half of the year taking care of the animals. It's very difficult and hardworking work. And thanks to that, we have delicious and local products. So what we do, we are interested in balanced tourism development based on increasing awareness by local community about who cherish the value of heritage, nature, and culture. And in short, this is where we are working, where we are living, and I would like to invite you, if you have chance to come to Poland, please feel welcome to contact me, and I'll be more than happy to show you our place.
Well, I take your invitation because a wonderful landscape, wonderful. And you saw your contribution was about on a sort of a balance of tourist industries with awareness through craftsmanship and teaching the children, you know, to approach traditions. It's wonderful, but more wonderful is your landscape. Let's change the place, my dear. Now I'm just the last, but not latest, but so I don't know. Glenn Sutter or Sutter, curator of human ecology and coordinator of songwriting for nature, which raises my curiosity. He is a professor of geography and environmental studies at the University of Regina. So Sutter or Sutter, it's up to you.
Thank you very much for that. It's Sutter. Sutter. And I often get Sutter because of the way it's spelled. But I appreciate the attention to that. I usually have to correct people, but this is I'm very happy to be part of this group and offer some thoughts about some of the work that's happening in this part of the world. I don't manage an ecomuseum or work for an ecomuseum, but I've been studying them here and helping communities locally set them up and work with the idea. So I do have a few thoughts to share. And so rather than sort of drill down on one or two examples and go deep, I thought I would just take a look at what's happening across the country. Of course, Canada was a very early adopter of the very early involved in the movement when ecomuseums first took root. So there is a bit of a history here that we all might be able to learn from. I'm going to start my timer so I don't go over. I enjoy this topic very much, so I do tend to go on at length at times. So I'm doing this work as a researcher and with a background in biology, ecology, and especially human ecology in the last half of my career. And I really want to ask this question directly, whether there's potential for the Canadian ecomuseums to address climate change issues. And the rather unsatisfying answer I'll float out there is possibly. And I'll explain why I come down to that answer. There's certainly a lot of awareness of issues across the country, from heat stress and disease to sea level concerns on the coast to effects of drought and water problems in the center of the province, especially a lot of concerns up north, because that's where a lot of climate change impacts are happening. And at the same time, there's a reasonable level of awareness in parts of the country. The areas in red shown on this map are where a high number of high percentage of adults think the Earth is actually getting warmer. So when we compare that map, where all the red is there to where ecomuseums have actually taken root in this country, it looks fairly encouraging. You see the being from coast to coast with different examples. None up in the north, unfortunately, but at this point, it looks pretty promising that there's some potential for the Ecomuseum model to shed light on climate change concerns. There's some direct examples as well. The famous Ecomuseum in Montreal called Fier Monde had a wonderful traveling exhibit that looked at the challenges of living in a sustainable city. It was active for four to 5 years and toured the province of Quebec, providing important information, important experiences for people to reflect on climate change. And here in my province, Saskatchewan, we're right in the middle, very landlocked, very prairie and boreal forest focused. There are a number of climate change motivators behind the work, from what forestry looks like under a changing climate to pressures on farming, and especially concerns about water. We're very dry in this part of the world. All of our water comes from the glaciers in the Rocky Mountains to the west, and those glaciers are disappearing. So it's a pretty clear cause and effect that we can point to around climate change and water. There are some specific examples here in the province. An ecomuseum fairly close to where I work here in Regina, called the White City Museum, has done some fantastic work on getting school groups out to understand their local heritage and including Indigenous perspectives on that heritage. Interestingly, though, the landowner where this project takes place doesn't really think climate change is a concern. So the museum had to work in that part of the project and did it anyway. Also, we have the Calling Lakes Ecomuseum, also in this the southern part of the province, and they're all about water quality. So while climate change is not really front and center in their work, it certainly informs what they're trying to do to raise awareness. But my short answer is that there is some potential here in Canada, but there's not likely, Canadian ecomuseums are not likely to do much at this point. And the reason is that whereas you saw that first map, that there's been a number of applications of the model across the country, most of those have focused on tourism, just attracting people and money, not with very little focus on climate. And importantly, most of those early projects are not active anymore. If you look at this version of that same map, the red dots are sites which have become dormant or transitioned to something else. There's simply not a lot of activity in those parts of the country, whereas the green dots are currently operating as ecomuseums. And just to drill down on that point, if you see here, where a lot of the activity is happening here in the prairies, that correlates with part of that earlier map where the percentage of adults concerned about climate change is relatively low. So it's a bit of a hard slog here for that reason. And as well, if we sort of step back, there's no organizing network across the country that would galvanize an ecomuseum movement here, whereas other organizations like the Canadian Museums Association and others they have other priorities, and they've been very slow to change course and to recognize the value of something like an ecomuseum. And I think part of that might have to do with underlying cultural hurdles, which I've sort of depicted here with the famous great chain of being, where humans are split off from nature and just one step away from God. It's this kind of linear, very disconnected thinking is dominant in this part of the world, and it encourages people to think more as individuals and within their comfortable silos more than working across those boundaries. And certainly here in a colonized colonial economy like we have across much of North America, there continues to be a lot of frontier thinking that we have a wilderness to be tamed, and that in these settings, it's very difficult for a more embracing, holistic idea like an ecomuseum to take root. But I think there's room for optimism. I don't want to leave on a bad note, for a couple of reasons. Here in my province, the emerging network of ecomuseums is supported by an active association, and their work is also supported by a robust advisory group, which is very aware of climate change issues. So the potential for climate change to be addressed is very high. And also we're doing a lot to encourage the adoption or the learning from indigenous ways of knowing, where we don't have that great chain of being. It's more of a collective, a holistic, very much ecological, not ego-driven, as not many economies tend to be. And you can see in this depiction of indigenized ways of knowing, there are plenty of places for robust, holistic projects to take root. We've also learned a few things about how to develop ecomuseums and how to avoid pitfalls. And much of this will be familiar to all of you, that it's important to build wide support. It's important to avoid falling back on the sort of traditional museum practices, put more emphasis on local engagement. It's tempting to become very complex as an institution and ossified, so it's important to stay flexible. And whereas if you're being motivated by non-climate issues, I think the trick there is to make sure that climate action is included in everything that you do, because it really is included in everything. And the last thing is that there are many pathways we can look at if we want to actually talk about cultural revitalization. And the one we're going to be focusing on soon is local food and food security, and climate change with its impacts on water is a natural place for us to do more work. I think that's my time.
Fantastic, Suter. I was impressed by your phrase when you speak about disciplinary silos. Fantastic, because Ecomuseum, on the contrary, is a combination of different aspects. And another sentence which impressed me is when you speak about nature, which is imbued with spirit. So this remembers me the Redskins. I think that they are the Ecomuseum, the best Ecomuseum operators of the world.
Absolutely. Yes.
Nature has a spirit. Well, I finished my Nuncia, I finished my session. I think we are in time. And I thank very much all the speakers, because they gave their contribution in exactly 8 and 10 minutes. Fantastic. Now we have to elaborate what they told us. Only 2 key words which, according to me, went out is awareness, people awareness. People should be aware of their heritage, transmission, education, in a one word, the heritage, which is something we have to pass to the next generation. So we have to preserve our world, our nature. We should live well, and we should give it as we received, as Veretskin said once upon a time. Nuncia, it's up to you.
Okay, thank you very much to everybody for your wonderful presentation. I'm very happy you were in time and you said a lot of very interesting things. Thank you very much, Edo, for your coordination. You're perfect. You are perfect in your role, and so I would like to say super thank you to you too. Now I think that we can move from the third session, that is about the climate as a global heritage, the museum's role. This third session is coordinated by Lisa Picozzi. She is a research fellow at the University of Milano Bicocca for the Eco Heritage Project. Okay, Lisa, this is your time.
Okay, thank you, Nuncia, and good afternoon to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today. And now it's time for the third section, climate change as a global heritage, the museum role. And in this section, it will be deepen investigate the role of museums in climate action activities. So each speaker will have 10 minutes for a presentation. And let's start with the first speaker, Douglas Worth. And he is a culture and sustainability specialist from Canada. So Douglas, I leave the floor to you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And I'm thrilled to be part of this very progressive global sharing venue. I've come to expect that of the Ecomuseum world, and it continues to deliver. And thanks too to Glenn for his inspiring and sometimes sobering reflections, because I think they're the way we actually get move to success. I'm just going to start my timer, and I'm going to share my screen. And I want this. And, okay. And how do I make this full size now? Anybody know?
You have to start the presentation above, I think, the PowerPoint. On the right side of the screen.
Okay, yes, there we go. All right, thank you. I'm Douglas Worth. I live in Toronto, Canada, which I want to acknowledge sits upon the ancestral land of Indigenous peoples, specifically the Huron, the Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. I should also note that today, September 30th, is Canada's first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. This national holiday is one step along the lengthy path of Canada healing its historically troubled relationship with Indigenous peoples. I've been in the museum field for over 45 years, mostly in conventional museums. And during the 1980s, I learned about the work of ecomuseums and realized something was missing in traditional museum practice. Museums, or ecomuseums, seem to have evolved out of a more holistic, local living cultural reality. And they're designed to meet the evolving needs of that culture. And so, to me, the heart of the issue is really, can museums become catalysts of cultural adaptation, change, in our fast-changing world? And I believe that they can, like Glenn, not without some challenges. If they truly embrace the expansive idea of nurturing the muses right across society to cultivate reflection, creativity, insight, wisdom, and more, they can, in fact, be catalysts of cultural adaptation. And to that end, I created a tool to help museums plan for impacts that would be felt in the living culture, not simply within the walls of museums. The inside-outside model helps foster new conversations about leveraging inside museum resources in ways that have cultural impacts in the culture outside the museum. And all of this resonates, I think, with the ambitions of the UN SDGs in their far-reaching and interdependent nature. So now I want to introduce you to the inside-outside model. All right, so how do we, there we go. All right, so we're going to begin with a fairly simple vision and image here of the world with the natural environment containing a society, and the society is a subset of the environment, and the economy is a subset of the society. I placed in the center cultural and heritage organizations because that's our topic today. And just wondering, there we go, okay. And I also imagine that the overarching goal of heritage and cultural organizations is to add value and well-being to communities. And with regard to sustainability, I think that we have to be clear that we have to generate net positive social and environmental impacts along the way. And there are a lot of museums now that are, particularly because of climate change, becoming quite active in doing this kind of work. And so they quite naturally turn, first of all, just to acknowledge that these issues in the environment are becoming clear. It's not only climate change, it's ocean acidification, pollution, loss of biodiversity, etc. Climate change is particularly, it's sort of at the top of the list. But also, if we look inside these museums that are beginning to do this kind of work, we often find that they look for the things that they can do. That makes sense. And they look to things like energy efficient retrofits, waste minimization. How can they lower their greenhouse gas emissions? All of which makes sense and is all very positive. But they also know that these big issues, whether it is climate change or it's the problem of systemic inequity and racism, are looking hard at their own structures of staffing and board and governance to look at diversification. They're also developing some new planning processes and wondering about what skills what they need. They want to plan. Many are coming to the realization that they actually want to plan for cultural impacts. Well, what does that mean to actually have cultural impacts? And that in part means you need to understand what are the cultural needs, what are the realities, what are the dynamics, the complexities, and where are you going to actually have those impacts? It requires a lot of effective planning. So, which brings me to the heart of the inside-outside model, which is really I'm just going to try and get rid of that. A look at the outer world, the living culture. And here we find that there is a familiar first place to turn, and that is, in what way do we have impacts on individuals? And I think anyone who works with visitors and the public within museums knows that when individuals are engaged in really productive ways, their curiosity is stimulated. There is self-reflection that is nurtured. They begin to look at their own values, their own behaviors in a reflective way. They might become creative. They might discover an empathetic way of looking at the world that hadn't been the case before. They might acquire new knowledge. This may or may not be the knowledge that was intended by the exhibits, because lots of things are happening co-creatively when people interact with museums. And museums, I think, know far less about what happens co-creatively than they do about the messages that they're trying to push out into the world. Ultimately, when individuals are engaged, it can lead to responsible action. But individuals isn't the only way to look at how museums can affect the living culture. If we look at groups, which are collections of individuals, the needs are somewhat different. There is a need to foster dialogue. How well do these groups actually work? Is there respect within the group? How do you cultivate trust within groups? Do these groups understand where they've come from, their history? Do they have a vision? Do they share a vision? And do they have ways to enhance cohesion, both within and between groups? These are all issues that are possible for museums to work towards. And at a higher level of complexity, we get into communities and neighborhoods, which may include many different groups. And so then we're also looking at issues of, is there equity across all of these communities and within the different groups that are contained within it? How do you build cohesion within the communities and groups? How do you generate trust? A lot of it really requires that there is relationship, because at the heart of culture is relationship. And it's not just a matter of information and what you know, but it's how you develop that relationship of trust and respect.
Sorry, Douglas.
Yes?
You have left 2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay. And so beyond that is organizations, which are all part of our social reality. And so, but progressive businesses are very interesting in how they've generated an insight into the profit first approach is not enough. We need to find net positive impacts across social, environmental, and economic dimensions. And I think museums can learn something from how some of those businesses are looking at developing sustainable business models. And then there's cities, which are more complex yet again, looking at issues of food security, energy, sustainable energy, etc. And participatory democracy is going to be vital. And if we look at perhaps the most challenging area, it's looking at human systems. Can our cultural organizations help become reflective and change-oriented to transform our human systems? And the economy is a huge one. We don't tend to know a lot about it, but it's an important place to focus. Also, social systems of equity and justice and governance in participatory democracy. So these are just some. It's not comprehensive, but it's a framework that where all of the component parts are actually interdependent and interactive, and also within the larger model, the environmental, the inside museum, and all of the elements of the outside are interactive. This leads us to the reality that in many instances, cultural and heritage organizations need new visions, new measures of success, and new strategies. This is the challenge, and I think it's why Glenn has suggested it's a difficult challenge ahead, but it is a place for optimism. So many thank you for your interest.
Thank you very much, Douglas. It was very interesting, your presentation and your reflection. And now it's time for Harry McGee. So Harry is a member of Reimagining Museum for Climate Action, and also member of ICOM International Working Group on Sustainability, and he's from UK. So Harry, welcome. You will have 10 minutes for your presentation, and I will advise you, I will inform you when you will have 3 minutes left.
Okay, thanks Lisa, and thanks for the opportunity to be here today. It's a fantastic event for a few reasons, because it's a partnership between different countries, different forms of museums. It links with the COP26, but is also a reflection of, both what we're trying to do within museums and between museums and with other sectors is great. And so because I've got a little bit of time at the end to talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, I'll save some of this for that time. But I would just mention now that it's great to hear from some of the different presentations, the different approaches to using the goals, because just to emphasize that, of course, the goals are just the latest within a 70-year-long struggle, really, to build a better world. Personally, I've been working with the goals since about 2016. And the way I tend to do this is I write these guides that you can see on the right-hand side there. You can get them for free to help museums and their partners to get started with these sustainable development approaches, because it has to be said that it is quite new for a lot of museums and those who work in them. But I think the thing that I would like to point out is the incredible innovation that the goals were, like to look at goal-based approaches as a way of breaking through, the inertia of, treaties and conventions and so on. The goals, they're a kind of shorthand that help us connect with one another and really, work on shared challenges. But I thought I would return back to 1972, really, to the time of the birth of eco-museums. And this is from the Roundtable of Santiago de Chile, very famous meeting. And I'd just like to read this quote out, that from this meeting, where there were people from within the museum sector and people working on sustainable development, that the first paper by one of these outsiders was like a bombshell. When the speaker had finished, we museologists looked at one another, confounded, not so much by what had been said, but because it had been made obvious to us at one stroke that the existence, sorrows, longings, and hopes of humankind, were not getting into the museums. We realized that the museum is grafted onto the tree of society, but it is nothing unless it gets from the host trunk the vital sap that has its origin in the fields, the workshops, laboratories and schools, homes and towns. And I mean, I love a good quote, and I think it's a fantastic quote. And it reminds me very much of the diagram that Nuncia showed at the start of this webinar, that thinking of these things as a tree, as an ecological metaphor. But we can also think that we're now 50 years on from that time. And that time, 1972, was also the time of the Stockholm Declaration. There was a lot of awareness then that, humankind and the environment were not kind of working, as they should do. So as we enter into 2022 next year, we need to be looking at, well, how can we make sure that the next 50 years time, we're not having the same discussion? How do we reset and reboot? And so just to give a very quick overview of this idea of the climate as a shared heritage, it was actually put forward by a Maltese academic in the 1980s. The common heritage of mankind is a legal principle. It's thought of in relation to the seafloor or to outer space or to radio waves. And it's a concept that's very much linked with the sense of an environmental commons. And actually that concept of climate as a shared global heritage actually helped set the whole thing rolling for the Framework Convention on Climate Change, which was adopted in 1992 at the Rio Earth Summit. And it's worth saying that the countries that signed up to that convention in 1992, they've met every year since 1995 when it came into force. And the next meeting will be in Glasgow in a month's time from today, actually. And we can say that museums are often involved in the public aspect of the COP, and the bottom image there shows the Prado in Madrid when they had a few projects on for COP25 in December 2019. And I can say that museum perspectives have been included in these conferences and consultations since 2017, and some of us have been involved in those. I'd like to say as a result of that, and through the partnership work with UN Climate Change, museums, cultural and educational institutions were specifically mentioned in the work programme for the Paris Agreement at COP24 in 2018 in Poland. And then the next year, we see the ICOM members adopt 2 resolutions on museums and sustainability. And so there's a lot of goodwill, and there is some things are happening, but we have to accept as well, emissions continue to rise. Something needs to change. And so within the Paris Agreement and the original Framework Convention, it has an article called Action for Climate Empowerment. It talks about the importance of education, training staff, public awareness, public participation, public access to information, and international cooperation on climate change matters. And when I see that list of 6 things, I just think museums. We need to look for the ways to embed those into our local communities so that communities are empowered to participate in these. I'll mention briefly a project that I'm working on as part of a team headed up by Rodney Harrison at University College London. Last year, we launched a design and ideas competition. We had 264 submissions from 48 countries, which was quite incredible because it's through all this COVID time. And we have an exhibition at Glasgow Science Centre, which will be the green zone for COP26. And so we have this website of additional inspirations and other resources that we aim, to help to provide to the museum sector and their partners afterwards. And we've got a book and a toolkit coming soon. That's a picture of the Glasgow Science Centre, is very futuristic. I just thought I would show you a couple of examples here of the exhibits that are on show from this competition. And these will be really familiar territory to Ecomuseum people. So what if we thought of museums as small places that supported communities in addressing local climate challenges and actions? So looking at places that are hyper-local, this is developed by a team in Brazil, and their project is called Existances. So it's a combination of existence and resistance, because it's local communities, including indigenous communities, who basically have to struggle against great, bigger, more powerful forces, communities which draw heavily on oral traditions for agriculture, that have spiritual connections with nature and landscape. And the exhibit shows these as small models, and I particularly like the image on the right-hand side there. Looks across to that, the building that looks a bit like an armadillo is called the Armadillo. It's where COP26 will be in a month's time. And just that sense of the connection between the hyper-local and these policy agendas is kind of rings a bell with me, strikes a chord.
Sorry, Harry, you will have 2 minutes left.
That's fine, thank you. What again, if we were to think of Indigenous lands as a kind of museum for climate action? So again, something that will be very familiar to people working in eco-museums. So the challenge of traditional museums is they dispossess Indigenous communities of their cultural heritage. They have no access to it. So what if you instead just forget about that sense, that the Indigenous people are the curators and the experts who interpret the landscape and their ways of life for others, for visitors. Or again, what if we were to use some of the traditional museum approaches, collecting, documentation and interpretation, but instead those were done by the communities. So rather than climate change being, as it so often is, a world of graphs and data and figures, we're ultimately talking about people's lives, and that what if people could use some of these approaches, and the museum instead was a place where groups come together to talk about their experience of climate change, not just as a documentation of what is happening, but with an aim of empowering themselves and one another to, collectively to act. And I think I would just pick up on a point that somebody made previously about addressing climate change. And we can think about that in its two senses of addressing it, meaning we just talk about it, or addressing it in the sense of we do something about it, either reducing emissions or empowering ourselves and others to live with the impacts. And I'll just mention briefly another project I'm involved in that's run by an organization called ICOM, called Our Collections Matter. And this is aimed at collections-based institutions, but would also have an awful lot of relevance and resonance with other forms of museum, including Ecomuseum. And so what because I'm working as the consultant on this, what we've done is like to take typical heritage and cultural activities and to line them up with the SDGs, because people are often unclear on what the connection is. It's available on the web, on the internet. It's very easy to find. You can either search it in terms of the 5 Ps of sustainable development, of the activities down the left-hand side, by the goal, or by any particular targets that you might be interested in. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Henry. So you talked about indigenous culture too, like the other colleague, and maybe there will be a good point for reflection after the conclusion. So thank you very much. And now it's time for Michela Rota. Welcome, Michela. Michela is a member of ICOM, of the International Working Group on Sustainability from Italy, and she works on a project and the researches with the sustainability at the core. So I leave the floor to you, Michela, and you will have 10 minutes, and I will inform you when you have left free minutes.
Thank you. Dear all, thank you very much for the invitation in this very important collective moment. I'm talking from Torino, Italy, and I'm happy to share with you some activities that the ICOM Working Group on Sustainability is carrying out, and also an Italian research project called the Musei Integrati. I totally agree with the richness of the messages that shared in the sessions. And also in my book, Museums for the Integrated Sustainability, I have deepened how museums can become more sustainable, what does it mean, which is their role for people and the planet concerning the building, the governance, the exhibitions, the activities and programs in relationship with communities and places. And so I contribute with my colleagues in helping the process, developing a series of methodologies and practices. I'm speaking today also as a member of the ICOM Working Group on Sustainability, and we know that ICOM places the Agenda 2030 at the heart of its activities. In the opening session, the President Alberto Garlandini has highlighted the commitment of ICOM for the climate crisis, the Sustainable Development Goal, Paris Agreement, and biodiversity. The effort of our working group really since the beginning, in 2018, is dedicated to help ICOM Executive Board consider how to mainstream sustainable SDGs and the Paris Agreement, and to support its members to contribute constructively in upholding the SDGs. And between the different activities, we are also discussing how to start improving these resolution number 1 on sustainability, also mentioned it before, released in the 2019. It's now time to have this critical thinking that we have heard before, and we need to improve some strategies. And also we are discussing, addressing also Prague, the Prague General Conference next year. We are discussing how to contribute contribute to the creation of new narratives within museums for a shift of priorities towards sustainability. And with its global network, ICOM is well placed to facilitate the telling with also other organizations, institutions, and associations. For example, we have the IPCC AR6 final report. We have read the climate change report, and that includes adaptation, mitigation strategies, and next year in September has to be published. So maybe this might be a suitable topic to begin developing such a new narrative. We are thinking about it. And for example, which museums around the world would be transforming into arenas for public participation, debates, exhibitions, and events organized in-house or in cooperation with local communities. A vision of museums as we have heard, catalysts for change, enhancing public awareness and inspiring public action, and contributing to the goal of attaining a sustainable future. We all agree about this role of museums and eco-museums together to contribute and sensibilize society and work together. I want to present an Italian project called Musei Integrati, Integrated Museums, where also ICOM Italy is present as a partner, and it's about how museums and similar cultural institutions can make a contribution to the SDGs and local sustainable development, and also contribute to a systemic change of the cultural ecosystem. This project is a result of is winner of the call of the Ministry of Ecological Transition for the implementation and promotion of the Italian National Strategy for Sustainable Development. And the partners, the leading partner is the MUSE, Science Museum of Trento, with ICOM Italy and the National Association of Scientific Museums. In particular, this project intends to create a space for discussion, exchange of practices and study with different outcomes on sustainable development topics and sustainability. To integrate also the activist museums within the urban agendas for local development, to create a link with the places, with the stakeholders, and to promote the role of museums as civic and cultural platforms that operate in close relationship with institutions and citizens. It's related also to the concept of extended museum, and encourage museums as community spaces for dialogue and knowledge construction, to foster public engagement in care of people, society, and planet through their operation and public programs. In general, we have four specific targets. The first one is related to create a network of museums engaged with sustainability. And we have created this Italian working group on sustainability, at the moment linked with this project. And also the second target is really the core of the research, to experiment the methodology with 30, more or less 30 museums that have been chosen with a tenor geographically in all the part of Italy, different typology of museums, different kind of governance, and also museums, big, small, heterogeneous choice of museums. choice of museums. And in this part, we are discussing, and we have organized 6 laboratories for discussion, starting from a master class on some topics, and then focus groups to improve the dialogue between colleagues and professionals, also about the museology of sustainability, about what can be improved. And the third target is more related to the promote the orientation with the public, so the museum with the places, the concept of the extended museums, to discuss how to promote also with the workshops, with the public and stakeholders, these topics, because the laboratories are about also Anthropocene, future studies, green transition. And for the third target is to create strategic partnerships with between these projects is within the with the Ministry of the Ecological Transition, but we want more alliances to improve, create an impact. We know that the number of museums dedicated to sustainable development concerning different aspects is increasing rapidly, but we need systemic changes and systemic partnerships at national and local level, and for the participation also in policy making strategies to create an impact. We know that at the moment, even if there are so many museums doing a lot of things, we know that people also think that museums are still seen as static places when really they are just the opposite. But a lot of things can be improved and achieved at the level of the single institution and in terms of systemic change to generate this impact. I recall here the ICOM motto, which is museums have no borders. We are all part of an ecosystem, participating to improve how cultural museums and museums can become more sustainable. At the same time, we recognize that we need culture to create the path for the change and the transition that we have to face as society nowadays. And agenda. Yes.
Sorry, Michela, you have 2 minutes left.
1 minute. Yeah. Agenda 2030, but not only asks to that all the parts of the society and institutions contribute. And culture is a sector that has to be sustainable in itself, transforming the extractive approach that has led us to the present crisis, and also at the same time is a vector for new narratives, a new way of living. So it's at a core of everything, culture. It's all about culture. So I just say, let's do it together. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Michela. Sorry if I stop you. You are almost finished. And Musei Integrati, it's very interesting and can be a pillar project for sharing sustainability with museums and so thank you for your presentation. And now it's the time for Nuncia Borrelli. She's a professor of sustainable tourism in Bicocca University, and she also did field research on ecomuseums, museums, tourism in Italy, UK, USA, and China. So, Nuncia, I leave the floor to you, and you will have 10 minutes, and I will inform you when you have 2 minutes left. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa, and thank you very much to all speakers that presented before me for being in time and for giving me a lot of suggestions and a lot of stimuli. Okay, I'm going to share my presentation. Anyway, As you can see from the title of my PowerPoint presentation, the main aim of my contribution is to discuss how ecomuseums can foster sustainable development goals and if training programs can contribute to make ecomuseums more effective in implementing the sustainable development goals and climate action. In order to reach such aim, I'm going to present the Eco-Heritage Project and in particular a survey that is a part of the Eco-Heritage Project and that was carried out during the last months. Such a survey, among other issues, led us to investigate how ecomuseums are interested in SDGs and are ecomuseums implementing the SDGs. Last part of my presentation is dedicated to the conclusion. Well, Eco-Heritage Project is an Erasmus Plus project. It is financed by European Union. It's involved 4 countries, Portugal, Spain, Poland, and Italy. It's take 30 months and it starts on 1st December 2020. The main objective of this project is to raise awareness about ecomuseums as a collaborative heritage management model, to provide skills to adult learners with innovative training materials, to generate a communication network between ecomuseums at national and European level, and to foster the creation of ecomuseums as an endogenous resource for competitiveness and social, economical, and environmental sustainability. Concerning the output, at least 4 outputs are scheduled for this project. The first one is a report based on the result of the survey that we are going to present, and it's described the situation of some ecomuseums belonging to the 4 countries involved in our project. The second one is a manual for best practice. We are working on this manual. The third one is a toolkit for participatory heritage management. The last one is to build an ecomuseums online network and a web-based training app. In the surveys were involved 102 ecomuseums that come from Italy, Poland, Portugal, and Spain, of course. And the survey was based on a questionnaire that is composed of 5 sections. The first section is about museums identification, structure and management is the second one. The third one was about human relations and partnership. The fourth one was the museum's approach to innovation. The last one was about the museum's performance. In this last session, there were some questions about the role of the SDGs in the activities of the ecomuseums. In particular, I'm going to show the result of 4 main questions. The first question was indicate which SDGs are included in the activity promoted by your ecomuseums. As you can see, the answers were quite different, but we can say that the main SDGs included in ecomuseums activity are quality education and gender equality. The second question that I'm going to consider was indicate which are the most urgent SDGs for your ecomuseums. And again, the answers were quite different, but we can say that the most urgent SDGs for the ecomuseums are again quality education, but also responsible production and consumption. Well, as you can see from the data, climate action is not included in the activities of ecomuseums, and it's happened even though ecomuseums are aware of the problem and of the necessity to take care of it. And it's happened even though ecomuseums are promoters of sustainability because they foster responsible tourism and they try to protect natural and cultural heritage. Looking at the Eco-Heritage Survey, definitely just Poland affirms to include climate action in their practices, and Spain indicates climate action as one of their most urgent SDGs. The third question that we considered was, do you integrate SDGs in your strategic policies? And the majority of Italian and Portuguese ecomuseums affirms to integrate in their strategic, the SDGs in their strategic policies. In Spain, half museums integrate them, while in Poland, only few ecomuseums integrate SDGs in their strategic policies. The last question was, does your ecomuseums have activity exclusively creating for the SDGs? And the data show that there is a relevant difficulty to implement activities directly focused on SDGs. So, which are our first conclusions? Ecomuseums are a vehicle for SDGs because they can be a tool for economic, social, and environmental sustainability. And there is an interest from ecomuseums in implementing the Sustainable Development Goals and the climate action, but also there is a huge difficulty in doing it. Ecomuseums are starting to be aware of this difficulty, and what we are trying to understand with the Eco-Heritage project is if a possible strategy for making ecomuseums more operative in implementing SDGs is launching training programs that can help ecomuseums in defining a path of knowledge, but also method for building practices focused on sustainable development goals and climate change. In the Eco-Heritage transnational report, we try to give guidelines for defining the ways for developing a training programs, and what was highlighted is that the training modules should serve for improving the museum's services and their relation with the communities. And in terms of effectivity and applicability, some specific topics should be addressed in a clear connection between local and global agenda. Such topics are, again, the strategic use of sustainable development goals, the climate action, innovation, but also monitoring and evaluation. In particular, we are planning to have a module 6, that will be dedicated to the climate action SDGs. So, to sum up, what we can say is that trying to give an answer on the question how ecomuseums can foster SDGs and the role of the training programs, training can foster the sustainable development goals in ecomuseums when it raises awareness on sustainable development goals and climate change, when try to divulgate discourse on sustainable development goals and climate change, and when it's try to build practices on SDGs and climate change. I take very few minutes because I imagine that we don't have too much time. So thank you very much for having me, and I can leave the floor to the next speaker.
Okay, thank you very much, Nuncia, and let's see the results, the next result of Eco-Heritage project. And now it's the turn of Ezio Marra from Milan Bicocca University. He is a professor of environment sociology, and his applied research concerns sustainable urban tourism and policy issues in metropolitan areas. So thank you, Ezio, and you will have 10 minutes, and I will inform you when you left 3 minutes. Thank you, welcome.
I start. Can you understand me? Okay.
Yes.
My presentation in full screen. Okay. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay. First, can democracy save the environment? Good question. Roadmap of presentation. What is democracy? Democracy is a method of procedural rules. The rise of ethno-racial cleavage, global versus local, urban regimes and coalition of power, environment, two different approaches, footprint and biocapacity, democracy and environment, AP and environment performance index, and the PM 2.5, and democracy, the ungovernable spread, authoritarian countries, conclusions. Democracy, okay. We go fast. The classical theory of Aristotle, there are different, excuse me, always, well, okay. Democracy is the government of all cities with the advantage of the poor. Tyranny with the advantage of monarch, oligarchy, a government of few with the advantage of the rich. It's not changing today so far. Now I have two different schemas. The first one is an old framework from Lipset Rokant. I think this framework worked until the end of 80s. But nowadays doesn't work anymore because the class conflict, we cannot think on the class conflict divide for divide left, right, and other kind of this thing. The new interpretation, recent interpretation, is from Picozzi that found four different kind of cleavages, new cleavages: egalitarian nativist, egalitarian internationalist, inegalitarian nativist, inegalitarian internationalist, that you can see here. This is a framework, a scheme until the 2018. As you can see, there is a rise of nativists until the 2018 and the fall down of internationalists. But I don't know if the story is finished, because in Germany we are going on the contrary, in the different direction. These are two slides from Picozzi. One is the highly educated persons. As you can see, in the year after the start of the new century, the highly educated person voted on the left. Is a new strange kind of thing, because it was not so some years before the starting of this century. In the last century was different. Another interesting is the property, not income, property, wealthy people with financial assets, property. As you can see in the green line, the 30% of wealthy, highly wealthy people vote for the left. Another useful framework, but I think I finished with the framework, the urban regimes. We can find 5 different urban regime: the city of growth machine, real estate, the 4D city, always manufacturing. Manufacturing has changed because of robot, but is still alive. The polytechnic city, the creative city, the city as an entertainment machine, and I hope is growing, the blue-green city, the sustainable city, sustainable development, and so on. Environment. We have 2 different approaches on environment. The Environmental Performance Index from Yale University. This is, you can see, is based on 32 indicators in 11 different categories, and the footprint network compared with biocapacity of countries. This is a map of environmental performance index. As you can see, the Western democracy don't perform bad, are not so bad. Is bad Africa, is bad the south of Asia, and so on. We can see something more. But the ecological deficit, the global footprint network, is quite different. The no good nations, countries are United States, the Southern Europe, not the Northern Europe, always the South Asia, and some part of Africa. South America is quite good. So why these two different interpretation of data? Here, some European countries, Finland, green, the footprint is less than biocapacity, so Norway, so Sweden, so Canada, but France, Germany, Italy, and the USA in Western democracy, the ecological footprint is greater than the biocapacity. These are other countries: Argentina, Australia, Brazil. Brazil has a great, big biocapacity. Russian Federation, starting of course after when Russia, after the Soviet Union. China, India, Mexico, Qatar is one of the consuming environmental resources consuming. Then for try to say something about democracy and biocapacity or environmental performance index, I used the democracy index from the Economist Intelligence Unit of the Economist. Here is a map. We have some graphs.
Sorry, Ezio, you have 2 minutes left.
Finish. Democracy index, environment performance. The R square is not so good, but if we are looking at the same scatter without authoritarian regime, here the linear R square is more significant. So you have a straight line within full democracies, flawed democracies, hybrid regimes. This is another scatter important. You can look at this is very important. Exposition to PM2.5 in different countries. Some countries are over more higher than unhealthy or unhealthy for sensitive group. The red points, democracies, are in general are moderate or good. This is the same regime classify with box plot. This is the same PM2 exposition. Conclusions. The different approach, the AP approach and GFN approach, the first one, the AP approach, shows that most developed and democratic countries are increasing and implementing environmental protection policies. But the GFN index shows that even the most developed and democratic countries continue to pollute the environment, even if today is less than yesterday. The authoritarian countries don't follow a precise model. Some implement virtuous policies while others pollute to excess. In general, full-flavored and flavored democracies, green demand counts more. Hybrid regimes are in transition. Authoritarian regimes are out of control. I hope that the international community will able to steer them in the right direction. We hope that the increase in literacy of the world population will lead to greater environmental and democratic awareness. This is a graphic always from Picozzi. We have a great increase in literacy rate, and I hope this is a good opportunity for environment. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ezio, and for your very interesting presentation and data. We can reflect on them. And thank you all the speakers from this section. And now it's time for the conclusions. And an Ecomuseums and Community Museum Coalition after the COP26. And so I leave the floor to Henry McGee again for the conclusions.
Just go back to okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So, I mean, it's fantastic to hear so many different presentations and really highlighting the value of this framework of 17 goals, which I'll come to talk about. But I thought I'd return again to human rights, really as a foundation of what we're talking about. And this is a quote from Eleanor Roosevelt that I absolutely love, that I'm just going to read out because I think it speaks to our work. That where, after all, do universal human rights begin? In small places close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any maps of the world. Yet they are the world of the individual person, the neighborhood that he or she lives in, the school or college that he or she attends, the factory, farm or office where he or she works. Such are the places where every man, woman and child seeks equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity without discrimination. Unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere. Without concerted citizen action to uphold them close to home, we shall look in vain for progress in the wider world, in the larger world. And this was from Eleanor Roosevelt, which she called the Great Question in 1958, because it speaks so much to what we're talking about, whether we think about it from a rights-based perspective or not. So this is the latest program that we have, launched in 2015 to run till 2030. And it is ultimately a program about human rights. It's ultimately a program about empowerment. And if we can think about the last presentation there, about democracy, the Sustainable Development Goals are a participatory framework. But it's really important to recognize that they don't exist in isolation. They are only the results framework for this document on the left-hand side, Transforming Our World, which recognizes a few problems, that the problems of today are interconnected, that the problems in one place are often created somewhere else, and that we can't just look at dealing with problems one after the other and just pushing them around the planet, because it just doesn't work. We need to think about opportunities for all people to participate in sustainable development. And the reason that we should do that is because it's actually their right. We can think about the right to self-determination, the right to development. These are well-established human rights, but as we see in society, we have so few opportunities to experience and exercise our rights, or even to know what they are. And so I'll give you a shorthand version of why we need the Sustainable Development Goals. So these two photographs were taken in the same place just by coincidence. The one on the top is when the United Nations countries agreed to the Kyoto Protocol. It's to do with climate change in 1995. 1995, yeah. So in the lower image, shows the conference in Kyoto, the ICOM triennial, where the members adopted 2 resolutions, one on sustainability and the implementation of Agenda 2030, and the other one on community museums and sustainability. Now, I don't just show this to show the coincidence of it, but to draw attention to the fact that they're more than 20 years apart. And that's why this is a serious problem. We have a breakdown in how the agreements are made, or the problems are addressed through these agreements, but unfortunately governments are often the weak link in the chain. We need to find a way to short circuit that, to find the opportunities for people to be empowered to play a part in these agendas. So we've spoken a few times today about the think local, what is it again? Think global and act local. Act local and think global. It's actually both. It's actually act local to act global. If global is just local everywhere, we can't just think, oh, we'll think about this stuff and we'll see what happens. We need to do it, because it won't happen by accident. And so if we can take the shorthand for for Agenda 2030 and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, it's actually much easier to remember as these 5 Ps about people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. And this is, we can think about this very easily in a small institution such as a museum or an ecomuseum or a community museum, where you're not really existing within the silo that we see silos all over the place in institutions, in countries, in governments. The more we think about these 5 things together, it's not so many to remember, and to recognize that any discussion that claims to be about sustainability that doesn't consider all of people, planet, and prosperity isn't a discussion about sustainability. We have to consider these things together. And so these are the goals, a set of 17 goals, but it's really important to emphasize that they're only the goals that help to better achieve existing agreements. They're not a replacement for human rights, for the Paris Agreement, for the Convention on Biodiversity. They're supposed to be a kind of, almost like a puzzle. We try to work out this puzzle to address all of those better. And it's very common to hear people talk about climate change as if it is only goal 13. And that's very understandable, because it's there as goal 13. Climate change affects everything, both in the sense that climate change really will undermine progress for all of the other 16, but also that all of the other 16 can be directed towards addressing climate change. You don't address climate change by addressing climate change, you address it by dealing with everything else. So if we think about, and I would also point out that it's quite worrying that through a few of the presentations today, that we see that poverty and hunger, which are arguably the greatest wastes of human life, happiness, and potential, are still so little addressed in the museum sector. That's really a great shame, and I hope that we can do more to address that. And I would also point out that that poverty is not just about access to money and wealth, although that is of course part of it. It's about access to your natural resources, to your heritage, to opportunity and decision making. So in aiming to be more inclusive, we actually help to address poverty. And so what is needed for a coalition? And what I thought I would do was to think about this in terms of the 4 parts of Agenda 2030 and transforming our world. People are often familiar with the goals and targets, or the goals, but often less familiar with the other parts. So this is suggested here just as a kind of form of, you could think of it as a form of localization. So vision and principles. So we will really need to have clear statements of intent, of our commitment to a better world, but also to acknowledge people's active, free and meaningful participation in shaping this vision and principles. We can't just have museums deciding what everyone should be doing, because that's very against a rights-based approach. But eco-museums are really very well placed to work with communities to say, well, what is our vision of the future? What do we want this place to be like? And what difference do we want this place to make to the wider world? The results framework is the easy part, because that's the Sustainable Development Goals and targets, certainly, those are the existing results framework. So we can take this and we can adapt it to our local circumstance. What are the goals and what do they mean in the place where we operate? Do the targets work for us? And if they don't, what additional targets do we need? What indicators will be meaningful? Because it has to be said that the official indicators are made for the country's reporting, so they're often not so relevant. But really crucially, the means for implementation is how will this happen? In Goal 17 is the means of implementation, it's partnerships. That we need partnerships within and between sectors and groups. We need effective relationships with communities and with people as individuals, again, as is their right, to create meaningful results and outcomes. But also, we can't just make statements and declarations. We need to be held to account. We need to make sure that we do this stuff. So we need to gather the information to tell the story of our activity. We need to share and report openly and transparently, to hold ourselves and one another and to be held to account, to honour our commitments and statements. So we need to move together, and we need to move fast. And I'd like to say again that sustainability, as it used to be talked about in its old sense, was about trying not to do much, to try to not be harmful, you know, don't harm things. That's just not enough. Sustainable development is about trying to make the world a better place, and sustainable development is how we do it. So just to point out, there are many great opportunities for eco-museums, museums, communities of all sorts to connect with. So these are about how we can take the global to the local. The decade of ecosystem restoration, ocean science for sustainable development, the last decade of the SDGs, and so on and so on. Fourth international decade to end colonialism, international decade for indigenous languages will start next year. I'd point out we're halfway through this international decade to eradicate poverty, but there is still 6 years left for us to do a lot more. And this international decade for people of African descent. So these are really easy, low-hanging fruit, you know, to connect with, because it's not just about how we take global agendas and kind of transplant them to our local setting. They're about how we enable people in our local setting to play a part in these if they so wish. And that would seem to me to be a good thing. So in the sense that museums and eco-museums and so on, they can reach lots of people. They can reach, you know, huge numbers of people. But these kind of agendas, they help to give our programs and our activities purpose. And I would say that that combination of reach and purpose is impact. And that's to say that it's impact that's decided upon and shaped in a way that's owned by the communities, by the people that we work with and we touch, rather than a top-down agenda, because that's not what it is at all. And so just to say again, like, so where do human rights begin? To go back to Eleanor Roosevelt's fantastic quote, if they could be these small places close to home, why can't they be eco-museums and museums? So the challenges are huge. People want to do things, many people want to do things, but they just lack the opportunity to do so. So it would seem to me to be really obvious that we just put these things together. There's so much to gain from it. It gives us purpose, and it will give eco-museums and museums a future as well. So that's how I would like to end. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Henry. Claudio.
Thank you so much, Harry, for your speech. I sincerely think that it is really important. As you know, this event aims to strengthen the collaboration between museums and the university and the cultural institution So with this event, we try to make a step forward for reaching our hope, our dream, that is to be able to continue to work together with the passion and the tenacity for a sustainable local and global development. So I think that what we can try to do in the future is to find a way for making the collaboration among these different institutions more effective. We have to find a way to make the collaboration not only a formal things, but some things that give a real effect. This is the point. And what we need to do now is to start talking more and to understand in which way the collaboration can become a real collaboration. Because the ecomuseums and museums already do many things, but they, in many cases, they are not together. They don't work together, they don't collaborate enough, and people outside the world of ecomuseums and of community museums is not able to understand the potential of this institution. So we have to make the efforts to work together for, of course, sharing information, collaborating, but also for let people that is outside our world understand what this institution are able to do. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Harry, for your conclusion. Thank you very much to everybody. This is time for asking if there are some questions. Are there any questions? Before closing the event, you can see if
I've got an invitation, but I think there is Douglas question or not. I don't know.
Douglas words. Douglas, do you have a question? Gelson, do you have a question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Gracias, Nuncia. Considering the words.
Sorry, I did put one in the chat. Actually, I've put two in the chat. So if you want to turn to those, then that's fine. I'm happy to discuss them.
I think in the last words on the question.
Last words.
Yes, maybe we can let Gelson the possibility to finish what he was saying, and then we can read the questions. Douglas, is a problem for you because he started talking.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay, thank you very much. Please, Gelson.
Oh, gracias. Oh, thank you. Well, considering the words spoken here about sustainability, democracy, and economy, it's very important to remember that actions and community, ecomuseums, museums, community can make a difference with communities and local authorities, can contribute to an awareness of gravity of climate change, like ICOM, like IPCC. We can do better if we organize ourselves in networks and partnerships, but it is important to remember that the destruction of nature and the brutal exploitation of human beings was carried out by capitalism, which continues with the most violent forms in most parts of the world. As Greta Thunberg said yesterday, and now blah, blah, blah. We need more action. The planet's life depends on this transformation. Here, what do you think is more action for transformation the planet in the next 10 years?
That question to me, Gelson?
Yes.
Yeah, can you just repeat the last bit? What does the small action? Just repeat the last bit. What small action is needed?
Sorry, don't.
Just repeat the last part of your question for me. It broke up a bit.
The planet's life depends on this transformation. What the action you think the planet and the human need in the next 10 years?
Yeah, so I think the you talk a bit there about the inequality between the north, basically the global north and the global south, And the great danger is that the rich global north countries will try to just adapt their ways out of climate impacts rather than, you know, acknowledging they need to reduce their emissions. But of course, that inequality might have been established over the last, you know, 200 years, but it's maintained by decisions today. So the more that we can, including museums, including all of us, can understand, well, what are our lives actually financing? Where is my pension pot? What is it? What are people spending my pension money on? Or my, you know, how is the interest in my bank account earned? So I think we have to all have a bit of an interest in this, but also arguably the most important thing that people can do is to write to their MPs, to their politicians. Like we see so much disengagement from politics in the global north that, you know, we just need to do this stuff. We need to show a greater interest in the wider world beyond just the borders of our own lives. That's what I think is the big challenge, but is also becomes increasingly difficult as it becomes harder and harder to work out what impact you have. Like, so my phone, who made my phone? Who made my clothes? You know, who was, you know, if it was cheap for me, it wasn't cheap for someone else. And so, you know, what's cheap for me is based on exploitation of someone else. And it's just to have a greater awareness of these things is really important, I think.
Thank you, Gelson, and thank you, Harry, for your answers. We can return to Douglas, yes.
Well, I put a couple of questions in, one about tourism, and because I do think that tourism is very, well, what I should say is that I think that building relationships around the world so that people have the kind of understanding of how, as Henry was talking about, we have a globalized source of all kinds of goods, but we don't know how they're made. We don't know how it impacts other lives, and we just get them. And the only framework we have for judging these things really is a monetary one. How much does it cost? And we don't even really care about the what the waste products are, the unintended consequences of all that. So tourism, I think, offers a way to build connection and relationship, but it's problematic in a lot of ways. At this point, there's a lot of carbon intensity, and it's only available to the rich. So, you know, how can we develop an approach to our operations as museums that build that cohesion in a functional way that helps to transform how the system works? Because ultimately, sustainability is not about individual components of a lot of things. It's about how they all come together to create one big system. And that's what's unsustainable, and that's what's collapsing. And we're just seeing it manifested in certain ways, but you often don't know what your actions lead to in terms of impacts in other parts of the system. And I'm still not sure how to deal with that, but I think the eco-museums have this great foundation of being connected to local community and building and aspiring to well-being and I think justice in a way that we don't have in the larger cultural frames and larger museums that see themselves mostly as tourist destinations. Because we don't have a theory of change for museums about how what we're doing is actually going to create the change that will change the trends that make up our unsustainable world. Anyway, I'll stop with that.
Yeah, so if I can just respond to that, I mean, one of the great pedagogies, learning approaches is education for sustainable development. And I can't remember the full definition of it off the top of my head, but it says, well, it makes its difference in the world. That's how it's defined by the difference it makes in the world. Because so often, certainly in museums, they're not that even, they're very unconfident about the difference that they make in the world, or even that they aim to make in the world. So, and if we can think about, let's talk about the unsustainable consumption and production of museums. So in a large museum, they may spend a huge amount of money to develop an exhibition to attract a lot of tourists or other people who may typically be high consumers, and it produces a lot of waste in the process. It's like the opposite of a sustainable model. So approaches that really are focused on helping people to understand impacts, and that are really about really small things. You know, we've seen so many times today, the lovely little small butterfly. To appreciate the small, beautiful butterfly does not cost a huge amount of money. It just needs a little bit of time and opportunity to see the butterfly. Mm-hmm. And I think, like, if we can talk about this with the relationship between tourism and heritage, because, like, let's take the World Heritage List. It inadvertently creates a kind of bucket list that drives really unsustainable tourism, that people travel around the world seeing World Heritage sites. It's not, I think, how it was intended to be used. But if we talk about this, like, responsible tourism, sustainable tourism has kind of two ends to it. Well, it has three parts to it, really, about how you educate and empower people before they become tourists, so before they've gone anywhere. So arguably, the way that an eco-museum works with communities and visitors before they've traveled a really long distance is one end of it. And the other end, of course, is, well, you know, who is doing all this traveling? Is it just really high consumers? And we need to kind of turn it round a bit, so that in relation to the discussion, the presentation before about democracy, so that we no longer think about the rich northern countries as if they're the great countries and the global south countries are the problem countries. It's the other way around. Mm-hmm. And that we flip it so that high consumption is just socially unacceptable. But and that comes to about, you know, what museums and cultural institutions do, like what social norms do they help support and create. So if they are aiming to be, you know, aim just for tourists, big expensive things that have massive consumption, that kind of has to change. So looking for the museum models such as eco-museums that aren't that model, the big museums can learn from them, not the other way around.
Right.
Very much, Harry and Douglas. Are there any suggestions, comments, or questions?
I got an invitation.
Yes, please.
Well, very interesting what has been said. And the speakers just insisted on many keywords, many. We have to elaborate them. And I think that Rosentino's question was very hard to be answered, but he was very concrete. He asked, what could we do in 10 years' time? And my dear, I would say to Rosentino, it's a big job. But anyway, we have to increase Ecomuseum's strength through the help of the community. Because we have to be educated together with the community, how to recognize, to be aware of what we have and where we live and what is surrounding us. So my invitation, just to be very short because time is over, is why don't you think we could elaborate the contents, what we said, and make a sort of 10 points recommendation to send to Scotland, to the meeting in Scotland, just to say the Ecomuseums and reunited in this conference with the help of other ones could be just, send a message in a form of recommendations I did with other project, and a sort of manifesto which takes care to say all what we examine today, because we hadn't the time to reason, we only announce, but I think it's very important to have a resolution, because between saying and between making, there is the concreteness of the action. We miss action, very effective action. So I think it could be a good opportunity and chance to reason all together in tranquility, through email and so on, to make a sort of a manifesto to send to Scotland, to the meeting in Scotland. And it's an invitation.
Yeah, can I respond to that? That I think, like your Ecomuseum network, that the people you need to get the message to are the ecomuseums. And I would suggest you already have your manifesto in the resolution from ICOM from 2019. So I think the next bit, it's like, okay, so what's next? What are the actions? And so thinking about, like, when we come to COP27, which will probably be in Egypt next year, is to be thinking now, well, when it comes to COP27, what are you going to say that you've done? You know, so you can use the COPs as a catalyst and to do it that way. I think because there are so many declarations of, you know, we are this and we're that. It's like we need to see action. And it's like, I think that's the bit. It's like, so what are the actions? Because, I mean, as I mentioned, the importance of museums got into the work program for the Paris Agreement before museums had even adopted the SDGs. So the sector, you know, the internet, the UN climate change and so on, they totally get the importance of public engagement and so on. That's an open door. We don't need to persuade them of that. What we need to do is to build the action within the sector. And it's not to say if we contribute to this SDGs or how we contribute to the SDGs. It's like, how are we contributing? And to use the SDGs as a way to tell the story. And that's what I think is the next bit. But it's to build the confidence within the sector, to build the sustainability literacy of what sustainable development is, and to do it that way. So I think that's it's because as I say, it's COP26 is a political event. The bit of the Paris Agreement that's about public engagement and participation, that's already agreed. That was agreed in 2018. The bits the governments will be working on are the carbon trading mechanism. So, you know, that bit is already agreed. The governments have already agreed that bit. There will be a new program for this thing called Action for Climate Empowerment. But that would be my suggestion, is to like really think within your network, between yourselves, what is it we're going to do in the next 12 months? What are you going to commit to do and do in the next 12 months so that you've got a great story to tell in November next year?
Thank you again, Harry. Maybe Glenn, do you want to say something? Do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted, as the conversation has been going on, I'm thinking that there's a strong focus on a number of activities that are obviously happening in the public sphere. Museums, of course, are in the public sphere, and most democratic governments try to be a little bit in the public sphere. But there's a third very powerful group out there in the private sector, the corporate interests, that is operating globally, has incredible social and economic power. And I think it needs to be part of the discussion for a couple of reasons. One, they do have a lot of power and can influence when brought into the discussions effectively. But at the same time, part of since their motivation is largely profit, there's been plenty of examples around my part of the world where they have a strong influence on the public awareness that we're talking about. And, you know, they will offer training programs to teachers to make sure that's more of a balanced message being put out there around coal production, because their stakeholders want more coal production. And ultimately, by by offering more of a balanced approach as opposed to leaving fossil fuels in the ground, saying we need to have a more balanced approach and we need to make sure individual responsibility is emphasized, that puts the blame on the consumer, largely the blame. And I think that's short-sighted. It means people are not likely to be empowered. And actually it's not valid, because as I've mentioned, the corporate sector has these large, very powerful interests, and they control the message in many, many ways. So I just want to make sure that that entire part of the sustainability challenge is not overlooked in what ecomuseums would want to do. I think there's plenty of partnerships that could be fostered and some really provocative engagement, activism that could be undertaken. So I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you very much, Glenn. There is someone that wanted to make a comment. Raul? Okay. Are there any other comments? Edo?
Yes, but I got a lot of commentary, but there is no time to reason upon that, because what Henry just said is very correct. But he should think that the situations in other countries are not so beautiful, probably, as they are in Scotland. Because in Italy, Nuncia, Raul make a compare, we have to fight for the existence of ecomuseums, because community just have ecomuseums, but institutions are now going to accept and to consider it at the same level with the museums. I work with museums. I'm from ICOM as well. I've got a lot of difficulty to say that museums should go outside, but in a real concrete way, not only announcing, words. But also I think that when Harry says, well, we need actions, hey, that's correct. It's a long time we are trying to make actions. But I should conclude saying this, because the most critical point is people's awareness. We should educate people, not only scholar pupils, but only adults, to understand where they live. Because if I understand where they live, probably they won't consume in a so wasteful way. It's a sort of a process, mental process. If we love the place where we live, we take care of it. But if we don't love it, we won't care. And I think that a lot of people belonging to museums realize what there was around them only when they were in a museum, because they spend their life without taking notice of what they have. So I think education is very important, totally speaking, generally speaking. Education, that means not only to school, to pupils, to kids, because it's very simple to speak to pupils. It's very hard to speak to adults, because institutions, I could spend more time saying, institutions reason with a political point of view. So we need actions, but we need to carry on a campaign of education as well. That's why I said it's very important from this meeting to have a sort of resolution, because otherwise we only met saying our opinion. But I think we have to act, politically speaking, with an action, a resolution.
Can I just respond to that?
Yeah.
So when there was the Decade for Education for Sustainable Development, 2005 to 14, hardly anyone did anything. So we now have this new ESD 2030, which already exists as a fantastic opportunity. Next May, I think it is, will be the COP, but for the Convention for Biodiversity. So as I say, there's like, it's so easy to make agreements, but what is the action?
I know. Between saying and making, obviously. I know, I know very well, Harry. I spent my life just struggling for this. All my life, I've got your white hair.
But then I think that's where you can like thinking about using the SDGs and targets, not as kind of if we connect with it or do we connect with it. It's like, okay, how are we going to do better? How can we use them to help grease the wheels, to help set the agenda, to plan the activity, to monitor and evaluate, and to communicate it? I mean, you have such a, like in Italy, you have such a great opportunity with these, you know, you have your network. As I understand it, the SDGs are quite prominent in the country. You know, these are, it should be, you know, ways to put these things together.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I totally agree, Harry. But now, future is something we have to design. No, I agree, completely, totally agree.
Okay, thank you so much to everybody for your presentation. I just a few comments for the end, for closing the conference. I think that what we need to work is that we need absolutely to work on education and on activism, and education and activism not only for pupils but for adults. And when we talk about adult, we have not to only think about the consumers but also the enterprises, because both subjects need to be involved, and all subjects, all actors need to be make aware of the effect of their actions. So for closing, we can say that again, we need to reduce the gap among discourse and practices. It is not easy, of course, it is not easy, but this is what we can try to do. This is, even though we will be able to do very few steps forward, it will be a result. So we just go on and try to do something good. So before closing the event, I would like to thank you again, everyone. I remind you that the event is recorded and the proceeding will be soon available on the International Drops platform, correct, Raul? And moreover, I would like to remember you that a scientific publication edited by Peter Davis, me and Raul Del Santo will spread the result of this meeting. This publication is financing by a grant that we obtaining after a submission, after an application, and the publication will be an open access. So it's very important that you send your contribution, because it will be a way for divulgate the result of this event, and also to make people easy, and also to make it easy available. Okay. Thank you very much again to everybody. See you very soon.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for all. Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye. See you.